The scent of burnt metal still dances in my nostrils every time I close my eyes. December 1944, Elsenborn Ridge, a name branded into my memory. Charles Allen on my papers, shot to the brothers who fought alongside me in the Sherman M4A3E8. The tank tracks still creak in my dreams, like a metallic symphony that never falls silent. I was a sergeant in the 2nd Armored Division, nicknamed Hell on Wheels. Our tank, which we named the Iron Lady, had an exceptional crew. Mike Robertson as gunner, Frank Martinez operating the radio, Pete Davidson as loader, and Johnny Wilson as driver. We were young, but we had seen our share of combat since D-Day. The Elsenborn region was a tactical nightmare, rugged terrain, densely wooded and covered in snow. The Germans had the advantage of knowing the area well, and their Tiger tanks were real steel fortresses. Every encounter with one of them was a deadly dance where the slightest mistake meant total destruction. On the morning of December 17th, we receive information about a Panzer column approaching our positions. The air was freezing, and the fog made it difficult to see beyond a few dozen meters. Martinez picked up radio transmissions indicating substantial enemy movement in our direction. Tigers, at least 3 of them, warned Pete, who was watching through his periscope. The distinctive sound of Maybach engines echoed through the forest. My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady as I gave the orders. Our only chance was to use the terrain to our advantage. Wilson, position us behind that ridge. Martinez, keep in touch with the other tanks. Robertson, load armor-piercing ammunition. The orders flowed automatically, the result of months of training and real-life experience. The first Tiger appeared in the mist like a steel ghost. It was an impressive 56 tons of advanced German engineering, with its frontal armor virtually impenetrable to our 76mm cannons. But we had learned the hard way that even these beasts had weak points. "Keep calm, boys," I whispered, although I knew that every man inside the Sherman was as tense as a violin string. "Wilson, when I give a signal, move in quickly and then stop. Robertson, aim for the side when he turns the tower." The Tiger advanced slowly, his turret rotating methodically, looking for targets. He was confident, thinking he had the advantage. It was his mistake. When I gave the signal, Wilson accelerated the Sherman, exposing us for just a few crucial seconds. As expected, the Tiger reacted, its turret rotating to face us. It was at that moment that Robertson made the perfect shot. The projectile hit the fin side of the German tank just below the turret. The explosion was deafening, but we didn't have time to celebrate. 2 more Tigers emerged from the mist, and the real hell broke loose. Grenades exploded all around us. Shrapnel ricocheted off the Sherman's armor. The inside of the tank was a cauldron of adrenaline, sweat, and controlled fear. "Another Sherman's been hit," shouted Martinez over the intercom. It was Lieutenant Parker's tank about 200 meters to our right. I watched the flames engulf the vehicle and preferred not to think about the fate of the crew. The next few hours were a blur of maneuvers, gunfire, and explosions. We used every tree, every rise in the terrain to protect ourselves, always trying to hit the Tiger's vulnerable points. It was a battle of nose as much as steel and explosives. "Chuck, we're running low on ammo," warned Pete after our 6th shot at the second Tiger. We had to make every shot count. We couldn't afford to waste a single projectile. It was then that I noticed something crucial. The Tigers were following a predictable pattern. They were superior machines, but their commanders were young and inexperienced, probably part of Hitler's last reserves. They used standardized tactics, while we had learned to improvise. "Wilson, get ready for a risky maneuver," he said, formulating a plan that could kill us or give us victory. "We'll use that ravine on the left. Robertson, when I say now, you'll have 3 seconds to hit the lead tank." The crew responded with a unison "Yes, sir." They trusted me, and I trusted them. All we had at that moment was mutual trust and the determination to survive another day. The plan was audacious, bordering on insanity, but it was our best chance. As the Tigers advanced in their rigid formation, we prepared to execute a maneuver that would define not only our fate, but possibly the course of the battle in that sector. The snow began to fall harder, creating a white curtain that could be our salvation or our doom. The metal of the Sherman creaked with the cold, and the air inside the tank was heavy with tension and anticipation. Every man knew his role. Every move had to be precise. The next few moments would decide everything. With the plan in mind, I gave Wilson the signal to maneuver the Iron Lady across the ravine. The Sherman glided silently through the snow, our hearts beating in unison with the gentle rumble of the engine. Martinez kept in touch with the other surviving tanks by radio, coordinating our strategy. 3 tanks from B Company are positioning themselves to the south, Martinez whispered. They'll give us cover when we need it. The snow had become our ally, reducing the Tiger's visibility. Their targeting systems, although superior, were hampered by the white curtain that enveloped us. This was our chance to level the playing field. Pete, prepare 2 smoke grenades, I ordered. Robertson, as soon as the smoke rises, we'll only have one chance. Aim for the junction between the turret and the chassis of the first Tiger. The plan was to create confusion. The Tigers, with their superior armor, tended to be overconfident. Their commanders often underestimated our ability to adapt. We would use that against them. Wilson positioned the Sherman perfectly behind a small rise. We could hear the Tigers approaching, their powerful engines echoing through the snowy forest. Pete loaded the smoke grenades, his hands steady despite the palpable tension. Now, I shouted. The smoke grenades exploded, creating a dense curtain that blended into the snow. Through the periscope, I saw the first Tiger hesitate momentarily, exactly as predicted. Wilson accelerated the Sherman, emerging from the ravine at an angle impossible to predict. Robertson didn't waste the opportunity. The 76mm cannon roared, and the projectile found its target with surgical precision. The lead Tiger shuddered, its turret locking into an unnatural position. Flames began to escape from the hatches, but there was no time to celebrate. The second Tiger reacted instantly, its 88mm cannon seeking our position. Wilson threw the Sherman behind the elevation seconds before a projectile exploded where we were. "Reload!" shouted Pete, his hands moving with practiced speed. The inside of the tank was warm despite the cold outside, our breath condensing in the air. Martinez intercepted a transmission in German. They're confused, Chuck. They weren't expecting coordinated resistance. It was our psychological advantage. The Germans, used to dominating with their Tigers, were being forced to reconsider their strategy. Every second of their hesitation was precious to us. Wilson, circle to the right. Robertson, prepare for a transition shot. The orders flowed naturally, the result of countless hours of training and real combat. Sherman moved like a deadly dance, taking advantage of every available cover. The remaining Tigers were trying to locate us through the curtain of snow and smoke, their cannons thundering blindly. That's when I noticed something crucial. The third Tiger had separated slightly from his companion. It was a kind of mistake only inexperienced recruits make. Wilson, position at 3 o'clock. Robertson, armor-piercing charge. The Sherman's engine protested as Wilson executed the maneuver. Pete loaded the projectile with methodical precision, each movement calculated to maximize our efficiency. "Target acquired," announced Robertson as I glued to the crosshairs. The isolated Tiger was perfectly positioned, its flank exposed for just a few crucial seconds. Fire! The projectile met its target with a deafening impact. The Tiger didn't explode immediately. Instead, its left belt detached, leaving it vulnerable and immobile. But our partial victory came at a price. The last Tiger finally located us, and its first shot passed so close that we felt the Sherman shudder with the displacement of air. Wilson evasive. Pete, last smoke grenade. My voice remained calm, even as every fiber of my being screamed in alarm. The smoke grenade gave us a few precious seconds of cover. Martinez reported that B Company's tanks were finally in position. It was time for the final blow. B Company attacking from the south flank, confirmed Martinez, his voice tense but controlled. The last Tiger suddenly found itself under crossfire. Its technical superiority meant little now that it was surrounded and outnumbered. Still, he remained a lethal machine. "Wilson, keep your distance." "Robertson, wait for my command." I watched intently as Tiger tried to deal with multiple threats simultaneously. It was his moment of hesitation that sealed his fate. As his turret rotated to face the B Company threat, he exposed his flank to us. That was all we needed. Robertson, fire at will. The projectile hit the Tiger exactly where its armor was most vulnerable. The resulting explosion lit up the surrounding snow, turning the battlefield into a brief, artificial day. When the smoke cleared and silence once again reigned over Elsenborn Ridge, 3 destroyed Tigers marked our victory. But there was no joy in our hearts, only a deep weariness and silent gratitude for having survived. Martinez checked the other tanks on the radio. We had lost 3 Shermans in the clash, but most of the crews had managed to escape. Considering what we were up against, it was almost a miracle. "Well done, lads," I said simply, my voice hoarse from the tension and smoke. Every man on the Iron Lady had contributed to our survival, and each deserved more recognition than words could express. The snow continued to fall, beginning to cover the smoking carcasses of the tanks. Soon, this battle would be just another story in the long narrative of the war. But for us inside the Sherman, those moments would be etched forever in our memory. The victory over the 3 Tigers brought us only a brief moment of relief. The Battle of Elsenborn Ridge was far from over, and the Germans were not known for giving up easily. Over the radio, Martinez picked up messages indicating that more Panzer units were regrouping for a new attack. "We need to refuel and repair what we can," I ordered the crew. The Iron Lady had suffered some superficial damage, but nothing that compromised its operation. Wilson identified a minor hydraulic leak that needed immediate attention. While Pete and Frank worked on the repairs, I took the opportunity to meet with the other surviving tank commanders. Captain Reynolds, our commanding officer, had set up a makeshift command post in a partially destroyed barn. "The Germans are bringing in elements of the 12th SS Panzer," Reynolds informed us, pointing to a map covered in markings. "Our positions need to be reorganized. Alan, your unit has shown exceptional tactical ability. I want you leading the next counterattack." The responsibility weighed heavily on my shoulders, but I nodded with determination. I returned to the Iron Lady with a plan forming in my mind. The crew noticed my serious expression as I climbed through the hatch. "What's the situation, Chuck?" asked Robertson, cleaning the gun sight with meticulous care. "We're going to lead a task force," I replied, gathering everyone inside the tank. "The Germans are bringing in reinforcements, but this time we'll have the advantage of preparation. Martinez, I want you to coordinate with the other units. We'll set up a more efficient communication system." The next few hours were dedicated to preparations. The temperature continued to drop, and the snow was now our ally and enemy at the same time. It provided cover, but also hindered our mobility. Wilson worked tirelessly on the tank's controls, adjusting them for best performance in the icy terrain. Pete reorganized our ammunition, ensuring quick access to the different types of projectiles. Robertson meticulously calibrated the cannon sights, compensating for the weather conditions. "Movement at 3 kilometers, warned Martinez, interpreting the interceptor transmissions. "Looks like at least 5 Panzers, possibly more." The information circulated quickly among our units. We now had 6 operational Shermans, including the Iron Lady. It wasn't an impressive force in numbers, but our recent experience had proved that quantity didn't always determine the outcome. "Remember, boys," I instructed over the radio, "the Germans are desperate. They'll try to force their way through at any cost. Our advantage lies in mobility and teamwork." We positioned the tanks at strategic points, creating overlapping zones of fire. The rugged terrain of Elsenborn Ridge offered excellent defensive positions for those who knew how to take advantage of them. The first sign of the attack came with the distant sound of engines and the movement of shadows across the snow. The Panzers were advancing in staggered formation, a tactic that showed that these were more experienced operators than the previous ones. "Hold position," I ordered, watching through the periscope. "But to get closer, Robertson, choose your targets carefully. Pete, prepare for rapid reloads." The first shot came not from us, but from the Germans. An 88mm shell exploded near our position, throwing snow and dirt into the Sherman sights. Wilson held our position, his fingers tense on the controls. "Now," I commanded, and our line of defense went into action. 6 Shermans opened fire almost simultaneously, surprising the Panzers with the intensity of their response. The Iron Lady shuddered with the recoil of the cannon. Robertson had chosen his target well, a Panzer whose wake was destroyed by the impact. But there was no time to celebrate. The Germans responded with a hail of accurate fire. "Sherman free hit," reported Martinez, his voice tense. Through the snow, I saw the flames consuming the tank. This time, fortunately, the crew managed to escape. The battle turned into a duel of mobility and precision. The Panzers tried to flank our positions, but our prior preparation allowed us to reposition quickly, always maintaining a cohesive line of defense. "Chuck, half ammo," warned Pete after our 8th salvo. Every shot had to count now more than ever. It was then that I noticed a change in the German attack pattern. They were concentrating on a specific point in our line, trying to create a gap. Wilson, position at 11 o'clock. Robertson, target the lead tank when it attempts penetration. The Iron Lady moved silently through the snow, taking up an ambush position. The decisive moment was approaching, and every man inside the tank could sense it. The lead Panzer appeared exactly where we predicted, his turret rotating to face what he believed to be our most vulnerable point. It was his last mistake. Robertson made the perfect shot, hitting the junction between the turret and the chassis. The resulting explosion created a chain reaction, forcing the other Panzers to retreat or risk the same fate. The battle continued for several more hours, but the decisive moment had passed. The Germans, realizing that they would not be able to break through our defenses, began a tactical retreat. When silence finally returned to Elsenborn Ridge, our small force of Shermans had destroyed or damaged 7 Panzers, losing only 2 tanks in the process. It was a significant victory, but we knew the war was far from over. "Well done, Iron Lady," I relayed to my crew, feeling the fatigue finally showing. Each man had given his all, and together we had proved that determination and teamwork could overcome even the most formidable odds. The victory at Elsenborn Ridge had cost us dearly. Despite their success against the Panzers, the Iron Lady and her crew were exhausted. The relentless cold seeped through every crevice of the tank, and our provisions were low. Still, we knew the Germans wouldn't give up easily. "I've intercepted enemy communications," Martinez reported, adjusting the radio controls. "They're regrouping forces to the north. It seems that Hitler has personally ordered a last-ditch effort to break through our lines." That information brought a heavy silence inside the Sherman. Every man knew what it meant that the Germans were coming with everything they had. Pete was checking our ammunition for the 3rd time. Robertson was obsessively cleaning the gun sight, and Wilson was making adjustments to the engine, trying to extract every ounce of performance possible. "Chuck," Wilson called softly, "the hydraulics are starting to freeze. I need at least an hour for a proper repair." I nodded, knowing that every minute of maintenance could mean the difference between life and death in the next confrontation. Martinez, contact command. "We need to know exactly what's coming our way." The next few hours were dedicated to meticulous preparations. Captain Reynolds organized an emergency meeting with the surviving commanders. The operations map showed a worrying intelligence situation indicating that the Germans had brought in elements of the elite Live Standard SS division. "They're going to try to crush us with brute force," I explained to my crew after the meeting. "But we know this terrain now. Every tree, every rise can be to our advantage." Robertson interrupted my speech. "Movement at 2 kilometers. Heavy vehicles." Through the periscope, I saw dark shapes moving in the snow. It wasn't just Panzers this time, but also armored troop transports. The Germans were betting everything on a coordinated attack. Wilson, engine running. Pete, armor-piercing charge. Martinez, coordinate with the other tanks. Robertson, I paused, watching the young gunner. Make every shot count. The first impact of the German artillery shook the frozen earth. They were heavy mortars trying to force us out of position. Wilson held the Iron Lady steady as shrapnel ricocheted off our armor. "Enemy takes at 3 o'clock, warned Pete. They seem to be Panthers, not Tigers this time. The Panthers were almost as lethal as the Tigers, but they had one crucial advantage. They were faster. Our previous tactic of using mobility would need to be adapted. A company losing ground on the right flank, Martinez transmitted urgently. They're being flanked by infantry. It was the decisive moment. If the Germans managed to break our line now, the entire position on Elsenborn Ridge would be compromised. We couldn't allow that. Wilson, high ground. Robertson, ignore the troop transports. Concentrate on the Panthers. My voice remained calm, even as mortar shells exploded closer and closer. The Iron Lady moved like a ghost through the snow, taking up a position that gave us a clear view of the battlefield. I saw 3 Panthers advancing in staggered formation, supported by dozens of SS soldiers. Fire when ready, Robertson. The 76mm cannon roared, and the first Panther had its turret blown off. Pete reloaded with superhuman speed, allowing Robertson to fire a second shot before the Germans could identify our position. But the SS were veterans. The third Panther managed to locate us and fired a hail of shells that passed dangerously close. Wilson proved his worth once again, maneuvering the Sherman behind a rise at the last second. Critical ammunition, warned Pete after our 12th salvo. 6 armor-piercing shells left. The situation was desperate, but something in me refused to accept defeat. Years of combat had taught me that sometimes victory depended more on will than resources. Martinez, call on artillery support. Wilson, prepare for evasive maneuver. Robertson, I hesitated for a moment. Those 6 shots need to take out 6 tanks. The crew responded with quiet determination. Each man knew his role. Each was prepared to give his all. The Iron Lady had kept us alive so far, and we weren't going to let her down. The battle that followed was one of the most intense I've ever experienced. Between artillery blasts and machine gun bursts, we maneuvered as if the Sherman were an extension of our own bodies. Robertson made every shot count, destroying 2 more Panthers with surgical precision. The last armor-piercing shell found its target as the sun began to set, turning the snow into a golden red carpet. The German attack had been repelled, but the price had been high. 3 of our Shermans were destroyed, and the Iron Lady was barely functional. When we finally made our report to command, we discovered that our resistance had been crucial. The line on Elsenborn Ridge had held out, denying Hitler his last chance to turn the tide in the Ardennes. The dawn after the battle brought a heavy silence over Elsenborn Ridge. The Iron Lady was damaged but still operational, as was her crew. We spent the night carrying out emergency repairs and replenishing ammunition via a supply convoy that managed to reach our position. The Germans lost a lot yesterday, commented Martinez, adjusting his radio. But I've intercepted communications indicating that they haven't given up yet. They're bringing in reinforcements from reserve. I watched my crew as they worked. Pete had a cut on his forehead, the result of a violent bump during the battle. Robertson could barely keep his eyes open, having spent all night helping other units with repairs. Wilson was up to his elbows in grease, struggling to keep our engine running in the brutal cold. "Chuck," Wilson called out, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I'll fix what I can, but the hydraulics are hanging by a thread. A direct hit, and we could lose control of the tower." I nodded, processing the information. Our situation was precarious, but we were still better off than many other units. Of the 6 Shermans that had started the previous day, only 3 remained operational. Captain Reynolds called an emergency meeting in the makeshift command post. "Intelligence indicates that the Germans are preparing a last desperate attack," he reported, pointing to new markings on the map. "They know that if they don't break through our lines now, the whole offensive in the Ardennes will be jeopardized." I returned to the Iron Lady with new orders and a risky plan forming in my mind. I gathered my crew for a quick briefing. "The Germans expect us to be weakened and disorganized," I explained. "Let's use that to our advantage. Wilson, I want you to prepare the tank for quick maneuvers, even with the hydraulics compromised. Robertson, we're going to need precise shots with no margin for error. Pete, organize the ammunition for quick access. Martinez, maintain constant communication with the other units." The next few hours were dedicated to preparations. The cold was still intense, but the constant work kept our bodies warm. Through the periscope, I observed the devastated landscape, tank carcasses still smoking, artillery craters, trees shattered by explosions. Movement on the northern perimeter, warned Martinez suddenly. Large formations approaching. For the first time that morning, the sun broke through the clouds, revealing a sight that made my blood run cold. A column of panzers was advancing towards us, supported by mechanized infantry and armored vehicles. "This is the time, boys," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Everything we've learned in the last few battles will be put to the test now." The Iron Lady took up position, its tracks creaking on the frozen ground. Robertson checked the sights one last time, while Pete organized the projectiles for quick reloading. Wilson kept the engine revving steadily, ready to respond to the first command. The German attack began with an artillery barrage that made the earth tremble. Fragments of ice and metal rained down on our armor, creating a chaotic symphony of impacts. "Hold position," I ordered, even as I saw other tanks begin to retreat. "Wait for my command." The panzers advanced confidently, believing that our line of defense had been broken. It was a fatal mistake. When it got into optimal range, I gave the signal. "Fire!" The Iron Lady roared, its 76mm cannon spitting precise death. Robertson hit a panzer directly at the turret junction, turning it into a pyre of twisted metal. Pete reloaded with supernatural speed, allowing a second shot before the Germans could react. The ensuing battle was a nightmare of steel and fire.